Sustainability is all about the diversity and resilience of the environment. In recent years, discussions on sustainability have shifted towards the effects of human influence on the environment and what actions we can take or what systems and policies could be implemented in order to ensure the preservation of the earth and the human race. We have looked into 3 different cities, Chicago in the United States, Dhaka in Bangladesh, and Cape Town in South Africa, to discover what different cities are doing well and not as well in order to gather ideas and think of an ideal sustainable city. During this video, you will learn about how each of these cities is doing, the good and the bad, and finally, we will introduce the sustainable city that we have created. The environmental quality in the modern day is fairly poor in both developed and developing countries, but for independent reasons. For instance, large cities in the United States are often plagued with air, light, and water pollution. These can lead to health issues and, as stated before, overall degradation of the environment. However, this does not mean that developing cities don't face the same issues. The air and water quality of environments surrounding developing cities also suffer, but usually with different causes. Let's ask the people. As cities become more populated, what do you think the largest problems they face are?
I know a large problem is CO2 emissions due to burning of fossil fuels in cars and whatnot.
Probably waste disposal and just making sure that they have a way to get everything out of the city and make sure it's not affecting people in the city.
Having enough resources for everyone, whether it's water or food or stuff.
One of the biggest environmental problems that exist is the burning of fossil fuels for energy. Not only do these fossil fuels release carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, creating global warming, they also release pollutants that are harmful to humans, even carcinogenic. Something that is carcinogenic increases a person's risk of cancer, usually by also being mutagenic, increasing the rate at which mutations occur in DNA.
One of the worst examples of this is car exhaust, specifically diesel exhaust. Diesel exhaust was officially classified as carcinogenic in 2012, and it most commonly causes lung cancer, although it can increase the risk of other cancers too. Lung cancer has a less than 15% survival rate and is one of the most common cancers. Diesel exhaust contains polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, which have long been known to be mutagenic and carcinogenic. These PAHs lead to mutations that affect many cellular signaling pathways. One of the most common and important pathways is the epidermal growth factor receptor pathway, or EGFR pathway. This pathway, usually tightly regulated, is responsible for the growth of cells. When a mutation occurs, it can be responsible for numerous cancer hallmarks, from cell proliferation to metastasis, and from cell death to angiogenesis, the creation of new blood vessels to feed a growing tumor. Truckers and miners who are exposed to diesel exhaust as part of their daily jobs are at the highest risk, and those who live in cities or near highways where lots of trucks and buses using diesel pass by are at risk too.
Diesel exhaust isn't the only example of this. The World Health Organization announced in 2013 that all sorts of air pollutions can cause cancer, especially lung cancer, and those in cities are at higher risk than those in the countryside. Factories located in or around cities also put various emissions into the atmosphere, but there are restrictions and guidelines for production that companies must follow.
Let's ask someone in the field. Here we have Mr. Donovan Robin, a regulatory specialist who helps with management in a chemical production company. From the production viewpoint, could you discuss the EPA allowances and general limits put on emissions?
EPA may control hazardous air pollutant emissions from industrial facilities by requiring all facilities to adopt the maximum achievable control technology that is in use by the best performing facilities. Once the maximum achievable control technologies are in place, EPA will then evaluate the area to see if public health is being adequately protected. Another method EPA uses to control hazardous air pollutants is requiring paint formulators and gasoline formulators to reduce or to reformulate their products in order to reduce the emissions of hazardous air pollutants from these products.
So, although it would be ideal to eradicate all emissions, that is just not realistic. We would want to encourage and fund new innovations, establish some sort of set of limits within our new city, potentially even stricter than they are today, and offer incentives. Incentives could be given to those who are leaders in reduction of emissions, and harsh regulations could be placed on companies who need to buckle down even further on their environmental impact, especially concerning emissions that are extremely detrimental.
Both large cities such as Chicago, Dhaka, and Cape Town face similar issues as smaller communities. Chicago has a population of 2.716 million, Dhaka has a population of 8.906 million, and Cape Town has a population of 3.430 million. Transportation is an issue for large cities as well as small communities, but large cities specifically have an issue with traffic and environmental effects of cars. Small communities face the issues of having to commute out of town for work, which result in higher commuting costs. Big cities often have various modes of public transportation, such as buses and trains, which small communities lack. Although there is a lot of traffic and pollution, these cities often have other ways to get around. For example, Chicago's CTA is the nation's second largest transportation system. It includes L trains, buses with over 100 routes, Metra, taxis, water taxis, and bike lanes. Cape Town offers RTA buses and some train services, as well as taxis and shuttles. Dhaka is not doing as well in the public transportation sector. Dhaka faces high levels of traffic congestion, noise pollution, air pollution, and inefficient public transportation. One popular mode of transportation of people and goods is rickshaws. Rickshaws are three-wheeled vehicles that result in high levels of greenhouse gases.
Big cities and small communities also share an issue with access to affordable and healthy food. However, smaller communities often have space for gardens to have fresh produce. In Dhaka, there are vendors in the streets that sell vegetables and other products, which is a nice contrast to most big cities. Chicago, too, has recently been working on urban agriculture projects in parks, on rooftops, and in airports. Some of these include the Urban Canopy Rooftop Farm, Chicago Lights Urban Farm, previously a rundown basketball court, and edible gardens at Lincoln Park Zoo. Both big cities and smaller communities often lack educational opportunities. Cape Town is reported to have a poor education system. One study showing 10% of youths over age 14 are illiterate in this area. Chicago is reported to have only 25% of students in the lowest performing elementary schools to have met standards in reading and math. Half of the high school students in the lowest performing public Chicago schools scored in the lowest category in reading and math as well. Another problem cities face are infrastructure for buildings and roads. Big cities with large populations have an issue with access to affordable shelter and utilities while also facing a lack of space due to overcrowding. Smaller communities usually have more space but receive less funding to fix roads. Their lack of technology is another issue because it leads to a lack of communication. As population increases, things get more crowded and there is a higher environmental impact due to an increase in transportation, waste, and use of utilities.
For the case of this documentary, we will focus on the three large cities, Dhaka, Cape Town, and Chicago, to explore what they lack as well as what they have to offer to our new city, beginning with Dhaka.
Let's ask the people. Can you locate Dhaka, Bangladesh on a map?
It's somewhere in this area. There. I'm going to say Bangladesh is one of these small islands.
The placement of Dhaka, Bangladesh leads it to be prone to yearly flooding. It is located in the central region of the Ganges Delta where three large rivers, the Padma, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna, flow to. All of the smaller tributaries to these rivers surround Dhaka, causing much of Dhaka to be flood-prone areas. These areas have 2 to 4 meters of flooding for 3 to 4 months of the year. Because of all the water, Dhaka has limited expansion ability to the south, east, and west, causing most of its growth as a city to spread towards the north. The northern land is always the most desirable because of its elevation, so the high-class residential areas have always kept themselves along the northern boundary of the city. The low, swampy areas were avoided for as long as possible, but with rapid population growth, low-lying areas were filled in, elevated, and different housing schemes were offered. This less desirable land and housing is often filled with families that have lower incomes and more difficulty in their lives. This is something that we would want to avoid in our new city, Extreme class differences that influence living conditions create extreme inequality that is detrimental to people's standards of living.
A big issue in Dhaka is the air quality, with air pollution reaching alarmingly high levels. It's not uncommon to contract lung diseases or even to die from such given the severe pollution. The particle matter in the air, including dust, smoke, and smog, as well as carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide, has climbed to dangerous levels on the AQI, or Air Quality Index, within the 201 to 300 scale labeled unhealthy. However, Dhaka, as part of the greater whole of Bangladesh, has taken several large steps in order to improve their environmental condition, starting with the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100. This plan included a new approach to water management, as Bangladesh is the largest delta in the world. Its rivers and floodplains, which make up 80% of the country, support life, livelihoods, and the economy. Additionally, the Power System Master Plan is the study for master plan on coal power development in the People's Republic of Bangladesh. The plan is based on the Vision 2030 long-term power development strategy for Bangladesh. Bangladesh has invested over $10 billion to make the country less vulnerable to natural disasters. These include flood management schemes, coastal polders, cyclone and flood shelters, and the raising of roads and highways about flood level.
Let's ask the people. Can you locate Cape Town, South Africa on a map?
Here.
Cape Town's structure was influenced less by the environment but caused major effects. What really influenced the city's setup was the Group Areas Act of 1955, renamed the Community Development Act in 1966. This piece of legislature divided areas for exclusive ownership and occupation of designated racial groups. The non-white population was allocated to the land farthest from the Central Business District, or CBD. The white population was given the land closest to the CBD, allowing an unfair advantage for opportunities. Social pattern use of space was not used as the basis of restructuring. Instead, the movement of people and location of housing, infrastructure, centrality, and land use were artificially induced based on the racial groups. In 1964, District 6, an area which was one of the most vibrant and ethnically mixed quarters of Cape Town, was demolished, and the mixed communities were evicted to the townships allocated to them as part of the Group Areas Act. The demolition of District 6 caused an extreme disruption in the flow of the city, creating an inefficient use of urban space. The effects of the artificial restructuring were extremely detrimental, so this is something we are going to want to avoid. Cape Town now suffers from the constant traffic and congestion in the streets, and air pollution poses serious health risks to South Africans. 37% of carbon dioxide emissions that come from the Western Cape, where Cape Town resides, come from the transportation industries.
Cape Town has recently been accumulating a lot more air pollutants as the use of cars has gone up since the recent dysfunction of the railway system. Car emissions are the biggest cause of air pollution, and as fewer people have been able to use the train, more cars are being bought and used. Mafar is taking steps in the green direction. Cape Town, South Africa, has attempted to implement new national legislation for its city environmental strategy. Over the past decade, it has enacted the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act of 2013, Western Cape Land Use Planning Act of 2014, and the Air Quality Management Bylaw of 2010, highlighting the need to ensure air pollution levels are controlled and mitigated as far as is reasonably possible. In addition to this, Cape Town has integrated a series of bylaws in order to reduce its negative impact on the environment. First, Cape Town implemented the 2010 Integrated Waste Management Bylaw that promotes environmentally sustainable waste management for the city of Cape Town, the 2013 Outdoor Advertising and Signage Bylaw that supports environmental and heritage conservation in the city, and the Public Parks Bylaw of 2010 that provides for the sustainable management of parks.
Let's ask the people. Can you locate Chicago, Illinois on a map?
Like right there. There. Right here by Lake Michigan.
The organization and urban structure of Chicago is extremely recognizable, so much so that it was the basis of the concentric zone model developed by Ernest Burgess in 1924. In this model, the center of an urban area contains the central business district and is surrounded by rings of different land uses and urban forms. The model includes a spatial distribution of social groups and social problems observed by Burgess, within different parts of the city, besides general air pollution from car use and factories, which the structure of the city does not influence. Urban structure can also influence the lives of everyday people in ways they may not realize. The structure of a city is extremely important to its ability to function efficiently and naturally. If a city is not set up in a way where it works well for the specific city, detrimental effects can be felt not only within the city but in the environment as well. However, this is not a one-way street. Not only can the urban structure of a city affect the environment, but the environment and the surroundings of a city can greatly influence how the city is set up.
The air quality in Chicago has worsened over the years due to exhaust from vehicles, smoke from factories, and general particle pollution. Specifically, water pollution in Chicago can have some major effects since the river that runs through the city can end up collecting runoff from storm drains and sewage pipes in cases of flooding, and eventually end up flowing into several different rivers or into Lake Michigan. Chicago has taken several steps towards their environmental impact. In 2009, Chicago implemented the Chicago Green Office Challenge to engage office tenants and building managers in a voluntary program to help reduce carbon emissions. It has since expanded to 10 other U.S. cities and gained a national sponsor. In 2011, the challenge helped over 140 participants in Chicago save $17.5 million. This challenge offers 7 goals with specific outlined instructions for execution. The goals are economic development and job creation, energy efficiency and clean energy, transportation options, water and wastewater, parks, open space, and healthy food, waste and recycling, and climate change. Through these 7 tenets, Chicago plans to go green. Providing goals and enumerating these to the public is something that we would definitely want to do in our city. Listing out actions that need to be taken can raise awareness and general effort to get the goals accomplished. Chicago is implementing this strategy at a municipal level, but the United Nations also has a set of goals titled the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that provide the same goal enumeration but at a global level.
Zooming back out to be more general, one important aspect of cities is how old they are. Cities' ages affect several things about them, from their sense of identity to their architecture to their urban planning. But could a city's age correlate with how environmentally friendly it is? We can first look at our 3 cities. Chicago, Illinois was incorporated as a town in 1833, and it ranks 11th out of 27 cities in the US and Canada's Green City Index, published by CMN, which is just a bit above average. Cape Town, South Africa was established in 1652, and Africa's Green City Index ranks it as above average in environmental friendliness. Dhaka, Bangladesh is much older than the other 2 cities. Its origins can be traced back to the first millennium AD, and it has poor environmental friendliness. These results suggest that newer cities may be more environmentally friendly. However, our sample size is so small that we really can't take our results seriously. We simply don't have enough data to make even tentative conclusions.
If we look at overall trends, the opposite may be true. While it's important to keep in mind that factors such as the wealth of a city play a much larger role in its environment, friendliness than age, and that age itself doesn't directly affect environmental friendliness. There are some factors correlated with age that may also impact sustainability. The key factor we'll look at here is density. Older cities that stretch back hundreds of years tend to be much denser than newer cities that have only existed for 100 or 200 years. Older cities also tend to have smaller suburbs. This is all because of the transportation limitations that exist in the past. Back then, nearly everyone's workplace had to be within walking distance, or they wouldn't be able to get to work. This means that older cities tend to have less urban sprawl, which is basically having large suburbs like Chicago and less car usage. Urban sprawl is bad because it takes away natural land, and car usage releases many toxic fumes into the air. These fumes include greenhouse gases, which promote climate change and carcinogens.
Based on this, we can see that older cities tend to be more environmentally friendly. Luckily for us, it's not specifically age that makes them so sustainable, but a third factor that tends to correlate with age, a high density. That means that even though our city will be brand new, we can make it highly dense. Now that we have thoroughly researched various aspects of a city that affect its environment, we can conclude what we want our new city to look like.
As we covered at the very beginning, diesel exhaust and other forms of air pollution can cause lung cancer, which is very dangerous. It's clear that a priority should be decreasing pollution in order to keep the city's people healthy and happy. Since cars are one of the largest air polluters and electric cars do not create emissions, one way to do this would be to ban all non-electric cars. However, electric cars are expensive and it would not be fair to create a city where only the rich can have cars. So our solution is to ban cars altogether. This will create a greener city and, as we'll see a little later, confer a few other benefits in terms of space and the atmosphere of the city. The long-distance transportation of people and the transport of large shipments of goods to and from the city will be covered in our section on how our public transportation works.
We may be able to reduce pollution by a large amount, but we still have the problem of all the electricity we'll be using to run our city day and night. This electricity is, by default, produced by burning fossil fuels. However, these fossil fuels pollute the environment and create global warming. The best we can do is try to develop good scrubbing methods, invest in research, and establish limits to try to stay under. Since we want a sustainable city, we will need to find a way to produce electricity without using fossil fuels, and we can do this through a combination of wind and solar power.
Another one of our priorities for our city is avoiding urban sprawl, so we need to make a highly dense city. One way to do this will be to use tall buildings, even for residences. High density is easy enough to implement, but there are some concerns with it. As we've mentioned, we want to create a nature-friendly city with plenty of urban agricultural projects. So how can we fit this in, especially considering that high density often comes with a maze of steel and concrete and no greenery? Singapore is a good example to look at here. They've taken the initiative to give their city greenery with grass and trees and other plants lining their streets. As for us, since we won't be using cars, we have quite a bit of flexibility because we don't have to worry about them. We should keep our streets just as wide as cities with cars and create pedestrian and bike paths. Then we can use the extra space to plant trees, create community gardens and playgrounds, and implement our urban agricultural projects. This will not only improve the air quality of the city, but it will also improve the mental health of the people living there, as they will not be confined to a maze of concrete and steel without any green. Plus, we can employ a portion of the population to work on maintaining this plant life.
Another way to do this is to use rooftop gardens. These would give all people in one building a common place to interact with each other and grow food to feed themselves, and once again, this is a way to implement our urban agriculture projects. By implementing these projects, we can create a high-density city that still feels alive and connected to nature. While having a higher density city will make the need for non-pedestrian forms of transportation almost unnecessary in many cases, we will still need to implement some sort of transportation. Transportation is a big part of city life, as it is necessary to travel in a timely manner from one end of the city to another. The most common form of transportation for short distances is by car. But like we've already covered, the use of gas cars in cities has proven to be extremely detrimental to the quality of air, so we plan to ban them entirely. Countries in Europe have started to promote other forms of transportations to help improve the health of the city and its inhabitants. Copenhagen in the country of Denmark is a prime example and has famously earned the title of the most bike-friendly city in the world. And naturally, the country holds the standard for low CO2 emissions. Our city can turn biking into a popular transportation method by creating flatter surfaces and designated bike lanes that are separate from pedestrian lanes in order to provide a smooth flow of traffic. But not everyone can bike all the time, so we still must offer general public transportation methods such as trains and subways. Subways can be the primary form of long-distance transportation through the city, and we can create an efficient network of them underground. They can also be used to transport large shipments of goods. In order to travel outside of the city, trains can transport goods and people to nearby cities. All of this will be powered by wind and solar electricity created within the city. We will have to work together with nearby cities that might not be using clean energy to implement our train systems, so we might not be able to be completely clean, but we can do our best.
All of this won't matter if we don't educate our children well. Since Finland has the best ranked education system in the world, our city will base our education system off of theirs. Their system includes no standardized testing because standardized tests have students cram for the test, but they don't really retain most of that knowledge afterward. Another idea that they have is that education is not a competition, so they don't have lists of top-ranking students, teachers, or schools. The main focus of education is to balance social inequality, so students receive free school meals, access to physical and mental health care, and individualized guidance. Students also have the option to go to vocational schools instead of universities to better prepare them for the workforce. The holistic learning style is also created by 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. school days and minimal homework. Having a non-stressful school life has resulted in the students there ranking top in the world, so that is the education system we would like to implement as well.